welcome to part 2 of these segments on Cleaning Up the Mess. I'm Ira Mathur. On those of you who've been following us, last week we asked the question of our guests, where did we go wrong and why? We asked why we are among the most polluted small island states in the world. We talked of our unlined, unfenced, toxic dumps that need shutting down, of litter laws that need enforcement, of the fact that Barbados beats us badly on the environmental stakes. They recycle at least 70% of their waste. We dump in unhygienic, unlined landfills where toxins seep into our water table, contributing to rising rates of cancer among our people. We talked about the dire need for waste management legislation and, moreover, lack of enforcement of litter laws. Today, we ask our guests for solutions. Senator Penelope Beckles, former Minister of the Environment, and Dr. Jyot Singh of the EMA. Welcome back. It was a pleasure to have you last week. But first, let's remind ourselves of what we're dealing with. Senator Beckles, do you think that the new government will throw the baby out with the bathwater? You had a policy document in 2007, and tell us about its positives and negatives. You've been in government and you know. How long will it take to actually get some of this going?
I don't think that, I've listened to Dr. Munir, I've listened to the government, they've been talking about recycling, they've been talking about waste management. In essence, it's really the public servants that do a lot of work. It's not the minister herself or himself. And those are the people that will continue to guide Dr. Munir, whether it be the EMA, whether it be the IMA, whether it's, you have the unit, the environmental unit in the Ministry of Planning, well, now in the Ministry of Housing and the Environment, and a lot of the people who were there certainly when I was there, they are still there. So I do not think that they're going to simply throw it out, but what I think they will do is that they will determine, of course, the direction of their government, where they are going, as I said, in terms of smelters, in terms of recycling and waste management, and I think to a large extent that will determine whether they will improve on it, whether they would make some changes. I don't expect wholesale changes because even some of the work that I did in the ministry would have been based on some of the work that I met. So that I didn't throw out, everything. You made some amendments, you would have had some consultations. Most of the policies that we have put in place would have been based on consultations throughout Trinidad and Tobago. I know the EMA has a practice. If you look at the water pollution, the air pollution rules, the integrated resource management policy, sometimes it takes as much as 2 years. In the case of the water pollution rules, I think that took maybe like about 2 years for the entire rounds of consultations throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and then a second round. And the reason that is done is because ideally you want to ensure that the public, that they can have their say. So at the end of the day, when you develop a policy, you can, of course, defend it, and you can say we have been, wherever it's the Cedros, we have been to Blanchisseuse, we have been to Barrapo, and very often, even when you complete that document, some people still say, well, I didn't get my opportunity. But you try to get as much people as possible.
And you can't please everyone, and I think the time for talking has ended.
Actually, to Dr. Munir's his program. I know that Nova Scotia was here, and we are a lot more advanced. The Minister of Local Government was working very closely with them in terms of the whole waste management and the recycling. So I think he has met some stuff there, and I am hopeful that what he does not like, he rejects, and what he's happy with, we move forward.
Well, that brings me to my next point. Dr. Singh, you are with the EMA, but you have to deal with the Ministry of Housing and Environment, with the Ministry of Local Government, with the Ministry of Energy, the Attorney General's Office, and the EMA somehow has to bring all of these entities together, and yet you don't really have the power to make a lot of the decisions, because these ministries make the decisions. So how do you move forward?
Well, the EMA's role in terms of sustainable development, because indeed it was an organization set up to support sustainable development, is really to look at the environmental compartment. And so the Environmental Management Act was supported with that in mind, and the subsidiary legislation which has since been formulated. So we are mandated to act through legislation. And I think that is a very important point that I would like your audience to note, that the EMA cannot act outside of that particular jurisdiction, except where we collaborate with other agencies. Part of what the EMA has been asked to do through the Environmental Management Act is the issue of coordinating environmental management response in Trinidad and Tobago. And I would admit that EMA has not done that in a very effective way. It's one of the things that certainly I have focused on during the time that I have joined the EMA, that EMA really needs to act in a coordinating role. Now, you would imagine that the Ministry of Planning may assume that role, but in the context of environmental issues, I think certainly there's a role for the EMA to take on, and we are moving in that direction. So what you find happen, and I think this is what you were alluding to, is that you have different ministries set up, each with a sort of an environmental function in parts. And we are operating in silos, and very often we might be replicating and in effect not doing very efficient work in terms of the limited resources that we have. I think the EMA going forward needs to take that responsibility on very seriously to ensure that coordination is effective and that each of the entities, ministries, NGOs, civil society groups are coming together and looking at the environment as a whole. I think that is really important for us to succeed.
The EMA has been fairly or unfairly been perceived as being toothless. What is your opinion on this? I
think entirely not so. I think the EMA has impacted in a significant way in terms of Trinidad and Tobago's development. The application of the Certificate of Environmental Clearance rules, for example, I mean, prior to 2001, development did not need an environmental clearance, except to some extent what existed within town and country planning. Now our development cannot go forward without getting a clearance from the EMA. And while many people argue that the EMA responds to the instructions of government, indeed the EMA was set up as an independent body, particularly when it comes to its regulatory function, that it is set up to make decisions independent of government and indeed even the line minister. Because the line minister is not in a position to say, I don't agree with that decision and therefore you cannot go forward. The EMA, through its board, will make that decision. Now in everything, of course, politics plays a part, and the EMA has to deal with that as well. And I think, it's an issue that we will continue to liaise with government entities. Having said that it's an independent body, clearly you need to work in partnerships and you need to be working in consultation with a wide variety in terms of stakeholders, yes, including community groups, but also inclusive of ministries and the government and the administration. So I think the role in terms of acting as a coordinator and acting as a facilitator in terms of discussions on the environment will be an important role for the EMA to play going forward.
I think the population as a rule would like to see less talk and more action, but we do need to take a short break. As you watch, I want to remind you to send in your comments and suggestions to cleaningupthemess@guardian.co.tt. This is an environmental special on CNC3. We'll be right back.